Mr. Prasad, Satish Reddy, Govardhan, Dr. Ramaswamy, invited speakers, distinguished scientists, fellow scientists from DRILS, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to everyone. March 15th, 2013, Dr. Kallam Anjureddy has passed away and left for his heavenly abode. This day, March 15th, 2014, we gathered here to pay tributes to him on the first anniversary of his demise. As a mark of respect to late Dr. Reddy, may I request all of you to observe a minute of silence. Thank you. Dr. Reddy, as most of you are aware, is a rare personality with inherent qualities of compassion, passion for science and research, and above all, a good human being. He is also a technocrat par excellence and a super manager to work with. Dr. Reddy's commitment to making affordable medicines for millions is well known. To my mind, we have not seen a man like this, nor can we expect to see someone like this in future. To put it in Sanskrit, na bhuto, na bhavishyati. He is a trendsetter in bulk drug industry. Is also known to be a new molecule man to media and has infectious enthusiasm and interest in drug discovery. His love for science and passion for research may be summarized with practical examples of Dr. Reddy's Research Foundation and Dr. Reddy's Institute of Life Sciences. Both DRF and DRILS have been the greatest beneficiaries of his time, wisdom, and commitment. Founder chairman of both these institutes, Dr. Reddy's mindset and his vision may be illustrated by his own statement as follows. This continues to be the beginning of our corporate presentation at DRILS. if the world's burden of disease is to be diminished, it needs a science that is both good and cost effective. India has the potential to deliver on science that is both good and cost effective. He further said, I have great confidence in our army of scientists comprising chemists and biologists, and I firmly believe that walking on the trail of innovation will lead to creating a great company, a company that doctors, patients, investors, and the public will admire. That truly reflects Dr. Reddy's personality as a scientist, as a technocrat, and as a superman to work with. So friends, if I may summarize Dr. Reddy's personality in terms of science, research and innovation, scientific research and innovation were music to his ears. To pay homage and tributes to him, we at DRILS have planned a scientific symposium with topics so near and dear to him. Indeed, an orchestra put together by a team of 20 scientists, most of whom were associated with DRF and or DRILS, and have actually interacted with him in day-to-day planning and execution of laboratory research. The program has 4 sessions, each session chaired by a distinguished scientist from DRILS. Each session is a part of an orchestra. We have divided into 4 themes. I hope you will enjoy this. My colleague Prabhat Arya will now take over from me to initiate and chair the first session. Prabhat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venkat. So now we're going to start with our session 1. And to begin with, I request Mr. G.B. Prasad, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Dr. Reddy's Research Laboratories, to please come to the podium. Mr. Prasad.
Good morning. When I sit here, I feel really Dr. Reddy's presence in this room. There's so many of you who had a special relationship with him. And as an individual, he was most at his best. He was at his best when he was talking science and with the scientists. And if he probably wanted to be remembered as somebody, I think it would be as a scientist foremost, and then as an innovator, entrepreneur, philanthropist, businessman. I always used to be envious of all of you, really, who worked with him very, very closely. He always had this special relationship with scientists. You could see it in his laughter, his joy, his enthusiasm for the work, and all of that, which I never shared with him. Though I was running a big business, making money for the company and all of that, but he never had that same relationship that he had with many of you, when he was discussing science with you. I used to be quite envious of that special bond between all of you and him. So I can feel his presence here through all of you, through people who worked with him very, very closely, discussed science, discussed development, discussed developments that are happening in the field and all of that. I and Satish, while we were running the business, we would go and start giving him updates about what is happening on the business. And 2-3 minutes into the conversation, he would have figured out what we were saying and then start yawning and saying, okay, come on. So his first love was science. He had we could capture maybe 3-4 minutes of his attention when we talked about our API business or generics business or some milestone that we achieved. He would, smile and say, good, very good. But then, this is what is happening in the lab, and this is the science that is happening, and that would really, excite him. So I think it is very fitting that we have this tribute here. And even this conference room reminds me of the conference room in the Dr. Reddy's Foundation, which Venkat and he were, very involved in building that whole space. So, I can feel his presence here. I can hear his laughter, that full-throated laughter that many of you experienced working with him. So it's very special to be here among all of you on this occasion. He is with us. He is with us through all of you, through the work that all of you do to really make this whole thing come alive. So thank you. And I wanted to share some of the lessons that I learned from him. And I'm sure all of you have stories about how you worked with him and took away something from him, but there are 4 or 5 lessons that I as an individual learned from him. I first met him in 1985 when he kind of interviewed me to, for his daughter. And he was just founding Dr. Reddy's laboratories at that time. And so I asked him what was his revenue for that year. And he said 3 crores or something like that. It was 84, 85. And he said in 95 will be 100 crores. He just said that with a very straight face. And I said, man, that's very audacious. And it's just 3 crores and he's saying 100 crores. And I think he achieved it a year earlier than that. And he was always thinking big in everything that he did, And then from there he said 1,000 crores, 10,000 crores and on and on and on. But that was just numbers. It was not the money that motivated him, but the largeness of how you think. And so that large vision, and he was always, excited about how many patients take his medicines, not, how much money we'd make. And he would have had this, many of you would have seen this thing on his whiteboard. He had written in his own handwriting saying, medicines are for the people and it is not for the money. And if you remember this, the money will follow. This was a quote from George Merck. And it was always there on his thing. And I don't know, that's something that I think resonated very well with his own thinking. So this big thing about large vision, thinking beyond money, thinking about impact, thinking, really, really big and not worry about resources. In his last 1 year back when we passed away, we had a memorial speech. Somebody who worked very closely with NTR said this about both NTR and him. He said both were very similar in some things. He said they both believed that everything can be done. There was nothing impossible. And this is Mr. Dora, who was intelligence chief and worked with him. I also felt that way. He would never look at the resources or the constraints, but just the possibilities. So that was something I remember. The other thing he had was a very large heart. And I'm sure Raghu knows about this. Whoever came to him and met him got what he wanted. So the only way he would refuse something if he didn't meet you, and he would say, I don't want to meet you. And that's the signal when he's not going to give you something, right, that you're going to ask for. But whoever went with him, whatever request, he would just get the checkbook and then write the check first. And sometimes we were his brakes. We had to tell him, no, don't do that. And we would say about budgets, about costs, about all this. Even this institute, when Chandrababu Naidu called and asked us to meet him, we went and met him. And then he said, I want you to give 10 crores or something like that for this institute. Chandrababu Naidu said this. And then without even looking at us, he said, yeah, it's done. And then it ended up that we funded a lot more than 10 crores. I mean, maybe 30, 40 crores and then operating costs and all that. But he never looked back. He said, let's finish, let's do it, let's go on doing it. So it's large-heartedness, something I also, admire in him. The third thing I think I learned from him was when he trusted somebody, he would completely trust him, give him full empowerment, and support him completely. And it was really, amazing for many of us. We all grew intellectually, grew as individuals, taking risks that we would never have done if somebody had not put that faith and trust in us and empowered us. And we made many, many mistakes, but he would never, point it out and criticize us for the mistakes. He would always say, yeah, it's okay, it'll be fine, just keep doing what you're doing. And I remember I spent about 40 crores of the company's money building a formulation plant in 95. Everybody was saying it was a white elephant. And my own colleagues were saying, you went overboard, you spent too much. And business was not coming for 3, 4, 5 years, and we had loans, we had borrowed money, paying interest, and it was eating into the profits. Everybody was criticizing us. But he just, was very, very positive about it and said, just remember why we did this. Maybe 1 year, 2 years, we'll have to wait, but it's going to be great. And he would always give me that confidence. So that's something, I think all of us as managers have grown incredibly because of the faith he put in us, the positivity with which he encouraged us, and also the trust. Then, another important lesson was his focus. He would not be interested in many things. Actually, once he thought a problem was solved, he would move on. He would not dwell on it. Now, if you look back, the API industry in Hyderabad was at a very primitive stage when he started his business. This is in 1985. And the whole business took off. Everybody learned the lessons. People who worked at Dr. Reddy's went out. They also started, they flourished. And the whole industry grew at an amazing pace. And most people in the industry will tell you that he was a pioneer in the API industry. But somewhere in the mid-90s, that was done for him. So he had moved on. He had moved on not even into generics, but into drug discovery. And what was over was over. He would just completely forget what he was achieved, and then move on to the next mountain to be conquered. And he would pursue that with relentless focus. So once he had moved on, nothing would interest him. So if we were talking to him about generics or API, he would say, yes, you are earning enough money so that I can invest in drug discovery, which is good. And that's why it is good, not because we did great stuff there, because he had moved on in his mind. And when he was on a problem, he was so laser focused. He would call us morning, evening, afternoon, and many of you scientists, I think he was really after you guys. Did you do the experiment? What is the result? And I know.
Most of what I wanted to say, he's pretty much covered. But I think it's first of all, I should thank Dr. Venkat for organizing the symposium in memory of Dr. Reddy. Because it's especially heartening to me for a couple of reasons. So I think one is clearly, the nature of the event. So especially when you commemorate, the first death anniversary of, such a great personality like Dr. Reddy. People like to do things in a very, very, big way, just to reflect the personality. You would organize huge things in a huge gathering and things like that. But what is heartening to me is this really is what commemorates him. It's a scientist. It's all about scientists here. And also the institution, which is also very heartening to me because this was something very, very close to his heart. So he remembered it very fondly because I remember at the time of, setting this up, he always used to tell the story about an institute he visited called the Scripps Institute in California. So because when he went there, he was very inspired about the kind of work that was done there, about the kind of people he met there. And, and he would come back saying that, it's like, that's an institution I want to create. And this is the dream, where we're part of. So on both counts, it's especially heartening for me to be here at this symposium. Always, I think when a person wants to leave a legacy, it's reflected in the kind of institutions that the person builds So this is one such example. Besides all the contributions, I mean, for example, all the contributions that he made to the pharmaceutical industry, but more than that, in terms of what the contributions that he made to the nation are very, very commendable. So these are things that reflect his legacy. But there are other things also which reflect, and in institutions of this nature, which are very close to his heart, is one such reflection of his legacy. So today I just want to talk briefly about, what we all keep saying about him, his passion for science, but more of what it really meant to him. When he was passionate about research and science, what exactly did it mean to him? Because, of course, he started off as a scientist in a public sector enterprise, but then what he's known for is a business that he built, right? So if you really see in terms of this whole business of medicines and what it really meant to him, coming from the core of, his passion for research, it was all reflected in the purpose of what the company is about, which is to provide access to affordable and innovative medicines. It's completely reflected in that. His entire life, his entire legacy, it's all reflected in that. So when we talk about access and affordability, clearly the thought which Prasad just mentioned, the inspiration that came from George Merck was something which was all over the place. I mean, in the whiteboard in his office, in his old office in Amirpet, it's still there, in terms of what he wrote with his own hand. And it's reflected in his speeches, which he made at several forums. He always used to quote this. And also in terms of several people he talked to, he would always, he would repeat this again and again, but each time there was a story behind it in terms of what he did. And those are the stories that inspires all of us at Dr. Reddy's. Because when it comes to access and affordability, some of the things that he used to talk about, say Merck, for example, it was about, something called, a product called ivermectin, because he visited an office of George Merck, Merck and Company in White Plains, and there was this mural, I believe, in the lobby of that office, which had a small kid walking a blind old man across the river. So it signified the contribution by Merck of this medicine called ivermectin, free to the people of Africa to rid them of the scourge of river blindness, right? So that's something that inspired him. So even when it came to Dr. Reddy's, right? So in some of the things that we do, for example, in the field of oncology, right? Recently, about a few years back, when we launched this product rituximab, for the first time in the world, a biosimilar of rituximab, it was still out of reach for a lot of people in India. So that's when I think Prasad gave this idea to one of our marketing people, saying that, we should not really let anybody go without getting treated. And then our marketing head at that point of time, Rita Chandrachud, came out with this program called Sparsh, which gave the power to the doctors to prescribe it free of cost to the patients who deserve them, right? So this, again, like I said, is the legacy of Dr. Reddy in terms of, what he thought. And when we think of access even today, this is what runs in our mind in terms of examples of, what we do. Also, there are several examples, right? So if I recollect in the past, he's also said this in a lot of speeches. When it came to, say, pricing of quinolones, some of the products way back in, say, the early 90s, a product like ciprofloxacin used to cost 26 rupees per tablet, right? To Dr. Reddy, if he made the bulk drug, because we were a bulk drug company at that point of time, the whole thing was about, it's like how much did it cost to make the bulk drug? And using that, he would say, what should be the price of the end product? And then if he saw the product being priced at 26 rupees by other companies, to him the whole thing was not how much profits Dr. Reddy's makes, but like Prasad said, how many more patients can get access to medicine? So it was with that kind of a thought, the pricing was done. Everything was back of the envelope. And after that, it followed with norfloxacin, it followed with enalapril, it followed with amlodipine. The pricing used to work this way. How many more patients can we do? And then, like George Merck mentioned, the profits would follow because the volumes would increase and the company would make a lot of money. But to him, the excitement was all about, how many more people had access to medicine. And there's several such stories, in terms of, how we looked at access and affordability. Even, for example, when Dr. Hamid of Cipla, his big story is always talked about what happened in Africa, with this HIV medicines. That is something he always used to narrate to me. saying that, it's like this is an example he made. So it was not just about his own work, it was also about others who made an impact, was something which was dear to him because in his mind it was about access to medicines. That people from India can make all the difference to people across the world. I think that was the message always on his mind. And then the second pillar, which is about innovation. Right, so this is something all of you know about, what he represented, because especially the scientific community, so even I felt the same thing, right? So all the scientists, more than envy, always felt that, to him, we were, somewhere down the pecking order when it came to me and Prasad. It was always scientists first, right? So whether it was the conversations, whether it was, in terms of priority, it was because it was exciting to him, because it was always about creating something new. He was extremely passionate about what he wanted to do. So his conversations with scientists was something he would keep talking and talking and talking. There was one gentleman who unfortunately passed away a long time back, one Mr. Chandrasekhar, right? So who used to head our, India business for marketing. A very charming personality at that point of time. So he used to also interact very closely with Dr. Reddy. So Chandrasekhar didn't have much of a background in science or, understanding of science, but he used to always tell me, and he used to tell this to his people, in the field, that, what, I spent this almost about 2 hours on the flight with Dr. Reddy, non-stop. He talked about some diabetes products. There was so much of scientific explanation. You know what, I never even understood one word of it, but that whole passion with which he spoke is what inspired him, and that's what it should inspire everyone else, is what he used to say. And this was a well-known marketing guy, so that's what he used to say. So that used to be the conversations where it came to innovation. But what I wanted to share was, there was a scientist he used to always talk about, and that scientist was Paul Johnson, right? So in several of his conversations, because I have a feeling that I think in the life of Paul Johnson, somewhere I think he also saw a reflection of himself, right? Because if you see the background of Paul Johnson, he was also had a background which came from agriculture. So Dr. Reddy's lineage also comes from agriculture, right? So Paul Johnson's father, I believe, was also a farmer, and so was my father's father, was also a farmer. Also in terms of, but more than anything else, I think it was about the pursuit of innovation which Paul Johnson went after, right? Because I think if you see Johnson as a company, I think in almost like 50 years, about 70 products were discovered at some point of time. But more than just the products, it was about, what was the application of these products. In China, for example, there was something about when Paul Johnson visited, he wanted to do something about the parasitic diseases, which were very prevalent in China at some point of time. I don't remember exactly which year it was, probably the 50s or something like that. That's when mebendazole happened, because that was not really meant for the world, but it was about China at that point of time. So Dr. Reddy used to draw inspiration from, again, just like I talked about ivermectin, these stories about even emerging markets, developing countries, and the issues that were there, and also the products that made a difference, that changed the lives of people. So that was something he used to talk very often. But I think more than anything else, the reflection of Paul Johnson was about the scientist who turned entrepreneur. I think inspired him the most, because he always often used to quote about Pandit Nehru talking in some forum, probably at the ISC, about scientists always being in the shell. Right, so when he talked about his life, he used to say that, that he always wanted scientists to come out of the shell and do great things. And that was something that used to inspire him. And the life of Paul Johnson, always inspired him as an example. That was another one. Again, I think like when it came to innovation, for example, because we started our careers, Prasad and me, not started, but at least became part of building the company with Dr. Reddy in the field of generics. For us, it was always about innovating to bring out a new process which would result in something which was a cost-efficient product, and then we could, price it affordably. So that's something for us. It was a lesson in business where innovation made a difference. To Dr. Reddy, it was always at a much higher level, and that was about discovery, right? So he made a lot of effort. We put in a lot of resources behind it. Great success in the beginning. But as always, the uncertainty and risk associated with drug discovery, there were products which didn't make it, right? But till the end, he was always in pursuit. So even one of the discovery unit that's still left behind, which is named after him, still runs with that kind of a dream. So to me, always the striking image would be, especially in the last days of Dr. Reddy, where he was frequently taking blood transfusions, right? So there was an image which again I stored it somewhere, was the image of Dr. Reddy undergoing a blood transfusion, but then it was his BlackBerry on his ear. He was talking to Uday Saxena at that point of time, because I was sitting next to him listening to him. It was about, what progress happened with the product, and I still have that image in my mind, right? Because I mean, to him that was ultimately his life. So even towards the end, it was always that, right? So that's something which really remains in my mind. So I think that's ultimately what science meant to him. It was always about products, to do something big, ultimately to also serve society. That was the end game. It was not just about something that started in terms of great products, but ultimately, how it made a difference to millions of lives. And that's what I think his legacy is all about. So today, when we remember him on his first death anniversary, it's always going to be about that. The legacy that he left behind, and how all of us commit to build on this kind of a legacy and really continue to touch the lives of millions of people, not just across India, but across the world. That's what we'll remember him for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Satish. Now I request Dr. Venkat to present a memento to Mr. Satish.